It began in the heat of a Louisiana summer, in a quiet suburb that rarely made the news. Metairie wasn't the kind of place where people locked their doors during the day. But what happened in that house on West Metairie Avenue shattered the illusion of safety for good. Brandon Thibodeaux was just 18. Bright, responsible, and quietly ambitious. He lived with his blind grandmother and carried more weight on his shoulders than most men twice his age. By day, he was a senior at East Jefferson High, where he excelled in auto mechanics. After school, he worked part-time at a local garage, saving up to one day open his own shop. In the evenings, he returned home to care for his grandmother, cooking for her, guiding her, making sure she never felt alone. He was the kind of person neighbors noticed, the kind that people said good things about even when he wasn't around. He also had a girlfriend, Polette Girard. They'd been together for 2 years. She was his equal in ambition, a girl with plans, and they often spoke of a shared future. Marriage. A house. Children. Friends said they were inseparable. It was the kind of relationship people admired, even envied. But behind the ordinary surface, there was something else. Something that didn't fit the image of the responsible young man with a promising future. For months, Brandon had been hiding a secret, a relationship with Lee's mother. Polette Girard was 43. Beautiful, assertive, and self-made, she ran a successful multi-level marketing business. She was also known for being volatile, competitive with her daughter in ways that made others uncomfortable. Brandon's affair with her wasn't just a betrayal. It was a threat to everything he'd built, his relationship, his reputation, his life. And it was unraveling faster than he could manage. August 12, 2021. The day started like any other in Metairie, hot, thick with humidity. But inside Brandon's house, silence clung to the walls. His grandmother, Mabel, hadn't heard him that morning. No footsteps, no clatter of dishes. Nothing. She called out for him, again and again. No answer. Despite her blindness, she reached for the phone and called a neighbor, Alice Dupree, a retired nurse who had known Brandon since he was a child. Alice let herself in. The moment she crossed the threshold, she sensed something was off. It wasn't just the stillness. It was the smell, metallic, heavy. She followed it down the hallway to Brandon's room, opened the door, and froze. Before we dive any deeper, I just want to take a moment to thank you for watching and supporting our videos. I've noticed that many of you are enjoying the content but haven't subscribed yet. If you like what we do, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button. It helps us more than you think. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the story. Brandon was lying on the floor, surrounded by blood. The walls were streaked with it. His body bore multiple stab wounds. His eyes had been nearly gouged out. The knife was still there, beside him. Alice's voice cracked as she called 911, barely able to describe what she was seeing. The first officers on scene were met with carnage. Detectives Michael Duval and Renee Martinez took one look at the bedroom and knew this wasn't a robbery. This wasn't random. The violence was personal, uncontrolled. Rage was written in the blood patterns on the walls. This was no clean kill. It was a message. Someone wanted Brandon to suffer. Duval had seen his share of murder scenes. But something about this one stayed with him. The choice of weapon, the targeting of the face, the overkill, it pointed to emotional chaos. A betrayal. A fury that couldn't be reasoned with. Outside, neighbors gathered in disbelief. Mabel, still in her chair, kept asking what was happening, unaware that her grandson, her caretaker, her lifeline, was gone. As forensic teams processed the scene, the investigators dug into Brandon's last known contacts. Friends were shocked to learn about the affair. Some had suspected something wasn't right between him and Polette, but no one imagined it had gone this far. Polette denied everything. She cried on camera. Claimed she'd only ever seen Brandon as a son. But Duval didn't believe her. Neither did Martinez. There were text messages. Deleted photos recovered from the cloud. Evidence of secrecy, desperation, and manipulation. What began as a story about a good kid with a bright future had turned into something else entirely. A portrait of a young man caught between love, lust, and lies. And in the middle of it all, a woman who blurred the line between maternal care and dangerous obsession. The murder of Brandon Thibodeaux wasn't just a tragedy. It was a fracture in the heart of a quiet community. A reminder that darkness doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes, it's already inside the house. Every trace of blood, every smear, every fingerprint, nothing was overlooked. Forensic technicians moved through the house with methodical precision, preserving the smallest fragments of evidence that might later reconstruct the horror that had unfolded inside. In the quiet of the living room, Brandon's grandmother, Mabel, sat undisturbed. That room, untouched by violence, stood in jarring contrast to the carnage in the bedroom. It suggested one thing clearly: the attack had been sudden, calculated. Brandon never saw it coming. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed in a low hum of disbelief. Residents stood in tight clusters, whispering theories, trying to make sense of what had shattered their quiet street. In a place like Metairie, small, familiar, insulated, this kind of violence was unthinkable. Detective Michael Duval understood that time was critical. He ordered a canvass of the surrounding blocks, hoping someone, anyone, had noticed something that didn't belong. A sound. A figure. A car idling at the wrong hour. In communities like this, secrets didn't stay buried for long. The investigation's first focus was Polette Girard, the mother of Brandon's girlfriend, Lee. At 43, Polette had long been a figure of fascination in Metairie's social circles. She was the kind of woman people watched: polished, composed, successful. Her beauty business, Beauty Buys, had made her a familiar face. Some dismissed it as a pyramid scheme, but Polette didn't care. She thrived on the attention, on the envy. Behind the public image, though, things were different. Her relationship with her daughter was tense, fraught with silent competition. People noticed it: how she dressed younger than her age, how she inserted herself in conversations meant for Lee. It wasn't just maternal concern. It was rivalry. That rivalry turned poisonous when she began sleeping with Brandon. The affair was a secret, but secrets like that never stay quiet forever. To Polette, the relationship was her grasp at youth, her escape from being invisible. But her attachment to Brandon began to spiral into something more obsessive, something darker. When Detectives Duval and Martinez brought her in for questioning, she tried to hold it together. She was dressed with meticulous care, her face made up to perfection. But her eyes gave her away. There was something behind them: fear, perhaps, or guilt. They asked the standard questions first. Where she'd been. How well she knew Brandon. She described him as my daughter's boyfriend, avoiding any hint of intimacy. She claimed she'd been home, working late on her laptop. But it didn't last. As Duval pressed, her polished front began to crack. Her voice sharpened. Her answers got shorter. When confronted with proof of the affair, texts, photos, she broke down. The tears came fast. He was my angel, she cried. I swear I would never hurt him. But Duval didn't believe her. Not completely. The depth of her fixation, the envy, the betrayal, everything pointed to a motive. And if she wasn't holding the knife, it didn't mean she hadn't lit the fuse. The second person of interest was her daughter, Lee Girard. 18. Brandon's girlfriend. Polette's daughter. The third side of a triangle that had already collapsed in blood. Lee had just graduated high school. College was ahead. A business degree. A new start. Everyone said she was kind, focused, smart. But she had always lived in the shadow of her mother's presence, overshadowed, overruled, overexposed. Her relationship with Brandon had lasted 2 years. They had talked about a future, wedding plans, a life together. Until everything unraveled. She found out about the affair just days before Brandon was murdered. The discovery had shattered her. What was supposed to be the safest part of her life, her boyfriend, her family, had become a betrayal that made everything else meaningless. When questioned, Lee looked wrecked. She wore her old high school t-shirt, her face bare of makeup. Her grief looked real. She spoke of how she discovered the texts, how she confronted her mother, how everything fell apart. I loved Brandon, she whispered, voice cracking. I didn't want to lose him. But when asked about where she'd been that night, the story blurred. She claimed she'd been at a friend's house, Taylor, just blocks away. She said she stayed the night. But she couldn't remember the details. What movie they watched. What time they fell asleep. Taylor backed her up, mostly. Yes, Lee had come over. But she left around midnight. Hours before Brandon was killed. The detectives pressed harder. Lee's sadness began to twist into something sharper: defensiveness, anger. I would never hurt him, she snapped, but her hands trembled. When shown the explicit messages between her mother and Brandon, she broke. Her composure shattered. She sobbed openly, uncontrollably. The pain was undeniable. But it left one question hanging in the room. Was she grieving? Or was she hiding? 2 women. 1 dead boy. And a silence between them filled with everything that wasn't said. Throughout her interrogation, Lee never wavered in claiming her innocence. She acknowledged the betrayal, admitted her anger, but insisted she wasn't capable of something as final as murder. Yet, her unsteady alibi and the raw intensity of her grief cast long shadows of doubt in Detective Duval's mind. The pain she showed was real, but grief and guilt often wore the same face. The third name on the detective's list was Richard "Rick" Girard, Lee's father, Polette's husband. A seasoned attorney, Richard had built his reputation on a sharp legal mind and a flawless courtroom presence. In Metairie, he was well known and respected. But his success had a cost. Long hours, late nights, and a growing detachment from home life. He clung to appearances. He knew how to preserve an image, even if that meant ignoring the rot underneath it. Richard wasn't blind. He had noticed the way his wife interacted with younger men. He saw the strange dynamic between Polette and Lee, the jealousy, the boundaryless behavior, the way competition had replaced connection. He had suspicions, ones he chose to ignore. He thought it would fade. He hoped it would pass. When the detectives brought him in, Richard arrived as if he were heading to court. Crisp shirt, tightly knotted tie, the scent of expensive cologne still clinging to him. He looked composed, but the mask didn't fool Duval or Martinez. They started with the basics. His marriage. His relationship with his daughter. Richard described his bond with Polette as complicated, though he claimed they still shared a functioning, even intimate, relationship. With Lee, he admitted things were more distant. He chalked it up to work, to missed dinners, to time lost. When Brandon's name came up, Richard didn't flinch. He said he liked the boy. Thought he was a good match for Lee. But that changed when the detectives mentioned the affair. A flicker of something moved across his face, anger, perhaps, or shame. His jaw tightened. His answers grew shorter. He claimed ignorance. Said he didn't know about the affair until after Brandon's death. If I had known, he said coldly, I would have ended it. Pressed on his whereabouts the night of the murder, Richard said he was at the office, prepping for an upcoming trial. He offered names, colleagues who could confirm it. But his tone was clipped, defensive. His body stayed still, too still. Duval knew that kind of control wasn't confidence, it was restraint. Richard denied involvement in Brandon's murder. Repeatedly. But his distance, his unwillingness to confront the sickness festering in his home, made the detectives uneasy. Was he protecting his wife? Shielding his daughter? Or just himself? Whatever the truth, Richard's silence felt like a lie in slow motion. Mid-August brought a break. On a scorching Louisiana afternoon, just before 3 p.m., Duval's phone rang. An anonymous caller. The voice on the other end was cautious, trembling. They claimed to have information about Polette Girard, something more damning than infidelity. A secret she had buried deep. Duval didn't hesitate. He and Martinez drove straight to Polette's office, a small, nondescript building at the edge of town. The sign outside read Beauty Buys, the name of her cosmetics business. From the outside, it was nothing. Plain. Unremarkable. Inside, it was different. No employees. No movement. Just rows of shelves filled with creams, powders, and empty promises. The silence was suffocating. Martinez noticed a locked door in the back. They asked about it. The assistant, a girl no older than 20, hesitated before finally handing them a key, her hands shaking. Behind that door was the real face of Polette Girard. The walls were covered in photos. Dozens of them. All of Brandon. Some were candid, some intimate. Others, disturbingly explicit. There were notes too. Pages of handwritten messages, obsessive and pleading. In one corner, a shrine of sorts. Candles. Trinkets. Pieces of him. His scent. His smile. Frozen in time, claimed by someone who had crossed every line. It was no longer about love. It never had been. It was about possession. But that wasn't the end. As the detectives searched further, they uncovered files, thick stacks of paperwork, spreadsheets, contracts. Evidence of something far more insidious. Beauty Buys wasn't just a failing business. It was a front. A trap. Polette had been luring vulnerable women, single mothers, mostly, into debt under the guise of financial independence. Promising profits, pushing product, and bleeding them dry. She made them buy in, invest everything, and then left them scrambling to sell what no one wanted. Some were working up to 20 hours a day. Others had lost homes. Some had lost everything. The scale of it was massive. The damage, irreversible. And Polette had kept it all quiet, tucked away behind lip gloss and Instagram smiles. With this, the detective saw her more clearly. Not just as a jealous mother. Not just a woman betrayed. But as someone who thrived on control. Someone who needed to own what she loved, and destroy anything that threatened that control. By late August, they were ready. The evidence, the photos, the altar, the victims of her scheme, it all painted a picture of a woman unraveling. Someone whose obsession with her daughter's boyfriend had turned deadly. Polette Girard, 43, had become so consumed by the fantasy she built that she chose to end the life of the boy who no longer fit into it. And when that fantasy cracked, the truth spilled out, ugly, desperate, and soaked in blood. Polette confronted Brandon in the kitchen of his grandmother's house, a place once used for their secret meetings, now the site of something far more permanent. It wasn't just jealousy that brought her there. It was control slipping through her hands. When Brandon tried to end things, she snapped. The knife was within reach. She didn't hesitate. She stabbed him again and again, each blow more brutal than the last. The wounds were deep, deliberate. His eyes were nearly destroyed in the process. The violence wasn't sudden, it was methodical, unrelenting. By the time it ended, Brandon's body lay mangled on the kitchen floor, the silence in the room heavier than any scream. After the murder, Polette did what she could to clean up. But there was no undoing the trail she had left behind. Her obsession with Brandon, her growing desperation, and the fraudulent empire she had built made it impossible for her to disappear into the background. The investigation closed in quickly. The arrest came just before sunrise on August 21st. Police arrived at Polette's upscale home in a quiet suburban neighborhood as the first light crept across the lawns. She answered the door in silk pajamas, disoriented and unprepared. When detectives informed her of the charges, her expression flickered between disbelief and defiance. She tried to keep her posture steady, but her eyes betrayed her. Panic sat just beneath the surface. Neighbors gathered on their porches, silent at first, then whispering. Polette had once been admired, praised for her entrepreneurial success and polished presence. But now, under the early morning sun, handcuffed and pale, she looked like a stranger. At the station, she denied everything. Said she had nothing to do with Brandon's death. But the evidence had weight, and no amount of denial could change the facts. Investigators were confident. There would be no easy way out for her this time. For Brandon's family, the arrest was a bitter kind of relief. They had spent weeks drowning in silence, haunted by questions with no answers. With Polette in custody, the path to justice, however narrow, had finally opened. The trial began on November 8, 2021, at the Jefferson Parish Courthouse. By then, the case had become a local obsession. Journalists filled the benches. Spectators lined the walls. The air was thick with anticipation. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Mark Tremblay, a man known for his precision and refusal to be swayed by theatrics. His presentation was clinical, cutting. From the outset, he portrayed Polette as someone ruled by obsession, someone who killed not in a burst of passion, but out of a need to control what she could no longer possess. He laid out the physical evidence with grim efficiency. The blood, the knife, the pattern of wounds. He walked the jury through her manipulation. How she built a business on lies, how she preyed on vulnerable women under the mask of empowerment. It wasn't just about Brandon. It was about who Polette really was when no one was watching. Defending her was Charles Chuck Lemoyne. He had presence, smooth, composed, with a voice designed to persuade. He painted Polette in warmer colors, trying to cast doubt where he could. The evidence was circumstantial, he argued. Someone else, maybe even Lee, could have committed the murder. He leaned into the narrative of media bias and prosecutorial tunnel vision. He humanized Polette, called her a mother first and foremost. But the jury didn't seem convinced. In the crowd, Brandon's grandmother sat through every moment. She never looked away. Always holding the same worn photograph of him. Lee Girard, silent and pale, sat beside her father, their faces drawn tight with exhaustion and loss. Testimony from the lead detective stripped away whatever sympathy the defense had tried to build. He described the crime scene in detail, how deliberate the attack had been, how nothing about it suggested panic or accident. It was rage, sharpened and slow. On November 22nd, after just 2 weeks of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. A small gasp broke from Brandon's family. Some cried. Some just stared forward. Polette didn't move. But her skin went ashen, and her mouth seemed to forget how to close. The word guilty echoed in the silence that followed. On December 1, 2021, sentencing was delivered. Life in prison. No parole. No appeals to sympathy. Just a final, quiet judgment. For the community, the case was over. For Brandon's family, it never would be. The fallout was wide. The truth about beauty buys, how it had siphoned money from women with nothing to spare, brought more scrutiny. More questions. Investigations followed. The facade was gone, and what remained was raw, embarrassing, painful. The Girard home, once bright and busy, fell silent. Richard Girard kept his distance. He still practiced law, but the air around him had changed. People whispered. Clients disappeared. He carried on, but with each step, it seemed the weight of what had happened followed close behind. Lee didn't stay. After the sentencing, she left Metairie altogether. Enrolled at a college far from the state. There was nothing left for her here but ghosts. Her mother's betrayal. Brandon's death. The lies. The silence. The things that were said, and the things that never were. She tried to move forward. She tried to rebuild. But the damage had already been done. The trauma never left her. Those closest to her said she had changed. The bright, ambitious girl they once knew had become quiet, distant, haunted. No one said it out loud, but everyone saw it. The trial had ended, the sentence was given, but for Lee Girard, the damage was permanent. The aftermath reached far beyond one family. The entire community felt the weight of what had happened. Beauty Buys, Polette Girard's multi-level marketing company, collapsed under public scrutiny. Investigations peeled back its polished surface, revealing something darker beneath: financial ruin, broken promises, and emotional devastation. It wasn't just a failed business. It was a machine that had preyed on vulnerable women, drawing them in with hope and leaving them in debt and despair. The shutdown came too late for many. Local outlets like WWL-TV continued to cover the fallout. The scandal became more than a news story, it became a warning. The name Beauty Buys was now spoken with bitterness, a symbol of deceit hidden behind charm and ambition. The trial left its mark on everyone. Brandon's death wasn't just a private tragedy, it was a wound that spread through the fabric of the community. Metairie would never be the same. Some wounds don't heal. They just stop bleeding.